Hi there. Welcome to another studio sessions. David Hughes here from the studio in Bendigo. And we are joined today by Karen Webster and Leila Naja Hibri. Welcome, Karen. Welcome, Leila. It's great to have you with us today for a discussion around the Australian fashion industry. Before we do kick off, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we are all on today, which for myself is the Dja Dja Wurrung of the Kulin Nation. Pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Who are the traditional owners of the lands that you're on today, Karen?
The Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as well. So I pay my respects to the elders past and present as well, and for the future generations.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karen. And Leila, yourself?
I am on Gadigal land, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present and future.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And yes, thank you again for joining us. Today, a discussion about the Australian fashion industry. This is being live streamed to our Facebook page. So for those of you who are joining us via Facebook, as always, we encourage you to join the conversation by asking your questions through the comments, and we will try to address those as we go through the conversation. But what I might do is kick off by asking our guests to perhaps give a little bit of an introduction to themselves. So Leila, we might start with you and your position at the Australian Fashion Council, where you are the CEO. And maybe you could give some background about the Australian Fashion Council and some of the programs that you run to support the Australian fashion industry.
Sure. So thanks again, Dave, for having me. It's great to be here. I joined the AFC as CEO in February of this year, and I have a background in fashion and also before that in many other industries. I was part of the AFC's board last year, and this year I became the CEO. The Australian Fashion Council is really an amalgamation of the Council of Textile and Fashion and the Australian Fashion Chamber. That happened in 2018. So we very much represent textile, of course, design, fashion design, but the whole ecosystem around the textile, clothing, and footwear industry. And the AFC has, I guess, many areas of focus. In particular, we look at how we can support and advance the fashion and textile industries. We look at emerging fashion. We look at opportunities to advocate for our industry, opportunities to grow locally and globally, and of course, sustainability, diversity, and education are really at the forefront of the foundation of the AFC.
Great, thank you so much, Leila. And it's a nice segue to Karen when you talk about the education piece. Karen, you've worked at RMIT and you're now principal at LCI Melbourne, as well as having worked extensively across the fashion industry in your time. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role as an educator in the fashion industry.
Yeah, well, I have been in education a long time, but I've always had a foot in a couple of camps. So the Australian Fashion Council, Leila, is so close to my heart because when that amalgamation time happened, I was both on the board of Australian Fashion Chamber, and then at that point I was the CEO of the Australian Fashion Council when it was still under the remit of the Fashion and Textiles Industry Group. And I think it's so important. I have to pay credit to Leila for the work she does. It's absolutely phenomenal. So my role is in education, but education is in a really interesting space to be because we have an obligation not only to develop the next generation of creatives, but also to provide a pretty active role in educating our customer, the people who buy fashion, the public, and also to educate the fashion industry on the best way forward. So I kind of see my position as not just being specific to tertiary education, but actually being an advocate for our industry. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm scribbling notes because there's a couple of things there I'd like to actually come back to as we go through the conversation. So that's fantastic. And the concept of educating the public one is a really interesting one that we'll come back to, I hope. the global fashion industry is massive. We've got 1 in 6 people employed globally in fashion.
Yeah.
And the industry is, depending on how you measure it, I've seen a few different numbers, but worth somewhere in the region of $2 trillion annually. I also, in my research, though, found out that it's an industry that's staring down the barrel of 30% contraction for 2020 for obvious reasons. It's the whole COVID situation we find ourselves in. But I still think those numbers are mind-boggling in some regards. Fashion is a global industry, but I'd like to focus on this probably a little bit more locally about the Australian fashion industry, and from our perspective, we're regional, we're Bendigo, regional Victoria, so making it a bit more local. I think what's common for all of us, though, is that we have closures of bricks and mortar stores that COVID has exacerbated. This was happening before COVID came along, but has been exacerbated. Wholesale orders have been cancelled. We've got local designers left with empty shops, warehouses full of stock, online sales now, which are also starting to take a bit of a hit as well. Something that has traditionally done quite well over the last couple of years, starting to take a bit of a hit. Leila, you with the AFC work with businesses across the fashion supply chain. I'm wondering if you feel that there are any ways that we can start to look inwards towards the Australian businesses to solve some of these gaps that we're starting to see in the global supply chain, and how we can perhaps start to bolster our local economy and the local industry.
Absolutely. I think this is a clear opportunity for the Australian fashion industry to look at itself and look at this as a way forward, in particular in terms of what do we do in regards to local manufacturing, in regards to upskilling, in regards to innovation and technology and improving that. Over the last, I would say, 20 years, and Karen would know a lot more about this than I do, but the Australian fashion industry, like many other, it's very similar in many other countries with the access to cheap labor in developing countries. Most businesses have moved or offshored their manufacturing capabilities overseas to China, to Cambodia, and so on, like many developing countries. And it's unfortunate. The good news is that at the moment, the industry finds itself in a space where it's rethinking its strategy in terms of manufacturing and sovereignty, and saying, why are we in this situation where, we've been cut off, let's say, from other parts of the world, and we have virtually lost some of the skills that we used to have. We haven't innovated as well as we should have in the areas of manufacturing and sustainability. And it's time to do something about it. I think we have to be wary about getting too excited about that at this moment, because we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the government support, and we don't have the skill set. The skill set from a design perspective in particular, and some other areas, is brilliant. You have, colleges like LCI and universities and so on that do such a great job of really producing unbelievably creative designers, and of course other areas of the business of fashion. But in general, there's been a decrease in the use of much of the handwork, let's say, that is involved in manufacturing. And also in terms of, as I said, technological advancement, we're a little bit behind because we don't have the capex or the backing of government or local institutions to help us grow that. It's very expensive to be technologically advanced, even though the long-term benefits are unbelievable.
Thanks, Leila. You've referenced a couple of times, or you've mentioned a couple of times there, the government support for making some of those things happen. And I'm wondering, if perhaps a question for both of you, how you feel the governments, maybe at state and federal levels, understand that need. and whether they really understand that need.
I'm happy to jump in there I work really closely with a group out of the Victorian state government, and I know Leila has done a lot of work with them as well, called Creative Victoria. And that's probably been referenced in other the talks you've had as well. And I find them fantastic to work with. I find them really open-minded. They listen. They're supportive with across a whole host of areas in terms of taking a Victorian design to the world, in looking at what our needs are. And they talk to on the ground manufacturers, designers, retailers, everybody, and they've become a conduit where they bring those groups together and say, how can we work more effectively? I probably defer to Leila to talk more about federal government, because I'm a little disappointed that we don't have a real investment in what I call innovative industries and creative industries at a federal government level. And certainly from an education perspective, we've just heard recently that the federal government hasn't been so supportive of the arts and humanities in education. They're not seeing that those kind of programs should be subsidised. And that to me is strange, because actually it's those programs that create the critical thinkers, the strategists, the people who are the problem solvers, which is something that comes naturally to designers. And it's actually those areas that we should be encouraging right here, right now during COVID.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Dave. Can I just add one thing to what Karen said? I completely agree with Karen about what she said about creative think. Honestly, one of the most proactive encouragers of our industry and supporters of our industry out there. I guess my point was very much what Karen was also alluding to. It was about federal government support. And I'm talking things like tax incentives, tariff incentives, investment in infrastructure, investment in education and R&D in our area. And it's to your point, Karen, it's because there hasn't been, in my opinion, based on what I've seen in the last year or so in being very much involved now in this industry at an AFC level, that there isn't a clarity about the value of the Australian fashion and textile industry as much as there is in terms of, for example, wine Australia or iron ore Australia or agriculture Australia or the meat industry, wool industry even.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we maybe as an industry need to get together and start to show our government, our federal government, what our industry is worth. And to the federal government's credit, I'll mention now that when COVID hit, the AFC put out a survey to the industry to see the impact of COVID on this whole industry. And we worked with McKinsey & Co. to put out some results. And because of that, we were contacted by the Minister of Industry's office, Karen Andrews, and we are having direct conversations with her at the moment. She's very much a supporter of this industry, and I think the challenge will be to have the data required to show what the value of our industry looks like, and then to give her an opportunity or a proposal to a strategy, a roadmap going forward to say, this is what we need from you as a government. How can you help us?
Yeah.
And do you feel this is, do you think this is a serendipitous time to be having those conversations? There's been a lot of talk recently about how the pandemic can act as a reset for lots of industries, for lots of things, for lots of societal issues and the ways that we live. But there's certainly been talk about how the pandemic can act as a reset for the fashion industry. There's lots of talk about sustainability within the fashion industry, and I know that's something that you've certainly got some thoughts around, Karen. Do you feel that this is a good time to be having those conversations because of that kind of feeling that this is a time to reset?
I think you're absolutely right. And if anyone's interested in this area, I'd reference Lee Edelcourt, who's a global trend forecaster. She's quite an amazing woman, a bit of a provocateur. And I was very fortunate to work with her for 6 years, and she's really about looking forward socially and culturally. And she's written some fairly distinctive comments about it was almost the pandemic we needed to have, which sounds a bit horrible, really. But what she's saying is that the industry had been working pretty much in very old constructs and had been working to wholesale models, that had been working around this whole fast fashion thing that was just getting completely out of control. And what it's done is it's made us stop. And you take it back to people in their homes at the moment and people who might be listening to this. What's happened is while we've been in our homes and we've been looking around us, we've noticed a few things. We've noticed we've got too much stuff. Most of us have realised that over the years we've been buying things that we didn't actually need. And we're actually assessing, do we really need this crap in our lives? You know, I've written a bit about this where I've called it the bombardment of stuff versus the creation of magic. And I think we've got to move to the notion of this creation of magic. We want things that give us joy, that make us feel good, but also we value. And the other thing that's happened is people have started making again. And as you make things, you realise it takes time and effort. And, you know, so you start to question, if I buy a T-shirt for $9.99, how was that T-shirt even made? You know, who made it? I couldn't even buy the fabric for $9.99. So what is happening through this whole scenario is that people are actually now questioning, where do things come from? What do I actually need? And if I am going to buy something, I want to buy something that I actually makes me feel great. And I think also people are questioning what they need. Like in lockdown, okay, hoodies and pajama pants, they're in high demand. But there's also people are saying now, you know, I'd love to have something really beautiful. I want to have something that when I put it on, it might be pure silk or velvet and it's made well. And when I put that on, it changes my whole demeanour. And that's going back to the roots of what really great fashion is about. And it doesn't have to cost a fortune, but you do have to invest in it. And you're not going to get it for $9.99.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. It's the magic, what was it? The magic, joy of magic. No, magic of joy.
I said it's the bombardment of stuff versus the creation of magic.
That's it. Creation of magic. It's also about giving you this joy. I think, you know, good design, whether we look at fashion or anything, should be about evoking a sense of pleasure. And initially, creative industries was all about aesthetics and making you feel good. We've kind of lost the soul of that. Yet every day we put on clothes. I don't know, maybe in lockdown there has been a rise of nudism. I'm not quite sure. But certainly in all the meetings I've been in, people are still putting clothes on. So they still make choices in their everyday lives. And if you're going to make a choice, make a good choice. Make sure it's a worthwhile choice. Make it a value choice. And if I could encourage you one, I would be saying buy local every time. Support your own industry, which is, again, another shift because people are saying now, how do we support our local communities? After the bushfires, now through COVID, we are starting to recognise local as being important. Yes, absolutely, Karen. And I just wrote something down here. I'm sure I heard once that we wear about 20% of our wardrobe.
Yes. So the stats are, the statistics were that 50 years ago we spent 20% of our family income on clothing. 20%. Leila, if we spent 20% today of our family income on clothing, we would have a very wealthy fashion industry. We wouldn't be going to the government asking for money. Now we spend around about 3% of our family income is on clothing, but we buy 60% more. So just get their head around that.
Yeah.
Spend significantly less, but we're buying 60% more than what we did 50 years ago. So our grandmas would have had one good coat and their Sunday best. Shoes would last for years, and you would polish them and look after them. You would mend something. You would sew a button back on if it fell off. But now it's seen as disposable. And unfortunately, we see fashion as disposable. We buy it and we discard it. And, yeah, we'll talk about that probably a little bit later, about this notion of what we're doing in terms of waste with clothing.
Well, we can absolutely explore that subject now. I mean, fast fashion versus slow fashion. And now that we're in this situation where lots of us have nothing to dress up for at the moment, nobody's going out anywhere, so they don't have anything to dress up for. And this statistic I was thinking about, where I'm sure I heard somewhere 20%, we regularly wear around 20% of our wardrobe, and there's 80% that sits there and doesn't do anything. And this morning, knowing this session was coming up, I was looking at my wardrobe and putting the same clothes on that I've been wearing all week, thinking I'm probably wearing about 1% of my wardrobe at the moment now, because who wants to do the washing? And, it doesn't really matter. So, but another thing I've been reflecting on is, for example, my wife's got the sewing machines out again,
Yes.
and masks are being made all around, certainly all around Victoria, if not the country.
That's right.
And there's all manner of, different designs and people expressing themselves through this beautiful, expressing themselves in this way. Do you think that that's going to ignite something with people?
Well, I that was what I was kind of implying before, the whole notion of making and the artisan. There's a revival of it. And so people are starting to recognize how important the notion of creating something is. And so then you value what you buy when you know how hard it is to actually make it yourself. So I think that, but I would disagree with you. I do think we have a reason to dress every day, and that is for ourselves. And so what we are also learning is our own sense of style. We're not having dictates. We're not having to wear what other people think we should wear. So when you go into a meeting, I know there's lots of stuff out there at the moment about etiquette in Zoom meetings and what you should or shouldn't wear. And you've got CEOs wearing T-shirts and you've got other people wearing suits. But actually that's okay. Wear what you feel great in. And I love dressing every day. I love putting on, I'm kind of known in my office for wearing bling and always a bit of sparkle or glitter, hence the reason I have a sparkly mask. And it's made by one of our local designers, Lisa Barron. And so I would encourage, that's again, buying local, making sure you're supporting your own community. But yes, I think the value of dressing for yourself, having your own personal style, is actually a great thing.
Absolutely. I'm going to take that concept just a little bit further and draw it out a bit. I want to throw a couple of quotes at you now that I came across. Diana Vreeland said, "Fashion is part of the daily air and it changes all the time with all the events. You can even see the approaching of a revolution in clothes. You can see and feel everything in clothes." And I was reflecting on some of the research I did for this that talked about after the last world wars and the pandemics and how there was a focus on quality over quantity. There was a focus on also on practicality over vanity. And I'm wondering what COVID will bring out in this regard, because I also read another quote that said, "In difficult times, fashion is always outrageous." And that was Elsa Schiaparelli. And, are we going to have a focus on quality over quantity as we come out of this? And are we going to break out in a range of kind of celebratory Technicolor shapes and sizes, looking to re-announce our selves to the world after COVID? What's it going to, it's the impossible question, but what's it going to look like at the other side?
That's an impossible question, because we have got to have fashion designers have an inbuilt crystal ball, and they actually scan and scope what's going on around them. And they are a barometer of our times, absolutely. And so And you're right, subcultural movements have evolved over years as a result of the kind of social impacts around us. The whole punk movement, which only lasted actually 18 months, but has had such a significant impact on everything since that, music, fashion, etc., was actually a response to what was happening in the UK at that time. And it was about people wanting to have a voice, especially those who were economically disadvantaged. And the kids of the day said, we want to make a statement here. And so people will be making statements post this. And I think the statements will be more related to what I call responsible innovation. I don't like the word sustainability. And I mentioned that to you earlier, Dave. I think sustainability is wrong now. Sustainability as a word came out. It actually first kind of evolved back in the 70s or 80s. And back then, yeah, we could sustain things. That was okay. You were able, if we were sustaining then, maybe. But now in 2020, we can't sustain anymore. We're actually destroying the world around us. And we've actually got to have a bit of a revolution. We've got to disrupt the whole system, and we've got to do things differently. And, we've had time to reflect, and I think the moment is absolutely right. And the revolution may not be punk, but the revolution will be about whole new genres of fashion. And I think a lot of that will be recycle, reimagining, renew, taking what you've got and doing things. People have got those sewing machines out, and that in itself will become a new kind of way of creating fashion. And shops and retailers will start having to take things back and mend them for people and refit them for people and do things. And that's that whole circular fashion construct, that don't throw it away anymore. Reuse it, and only buy things that you're going to keep for a long time, but actually have a longevity that you can do something with.
That's we might come back to that, Karen, the whole notion of as it's called textile circularity, I think. But Leila, I might quote you now, where I've been throwing quotes around there, because I did read something that you said that relates to this. What kind of relates to this? I sincerely believe that, as hard as this moment is for everyone in our industry, the whole world, for that matter, it is also a great opportunity. A great opportunity for us to take a stance together and to use this unprecedented time to be the catalyst for change that the business world so urgently needs. I'd be interested to hear you expand a little bit on that that thought.
Sure. So, Dave, I got into the fashion industry, I guess in the early 2000s because I think I'm an accountant and economist by profession, and I love beautiful things. I love the aesthetics of fashion. For me, fashion's always been a way that I could creatively, or be creative, because I'm not like a painter, I'm not a designer, but I have this creativity, I believe, inside me that I want to show who I am as a person through my fashion. That's my thing, right? And so I got into it. It was very exciting. It was very a fun roller coaster ride of a career. But then very quickly, I started to question this whole industry that really puts so much value, or has been putting so much value on things that are very superficial, has also led to severe, I guess, rethinking of, people's like value of themselves in terms of body image, in terms of wanting to be like other people and following trends and wearing what other people are. So it's actually was no longer an expression of creativity. It was becoming a follow the pack sort of thing. And that's where, trend driven fashion, in my opinion, and that's where fast fashion comes from, is really, has been an instrument that has pulled down the fashion industry from being an artistic and creative industry to something that, unfortunately, in many, predominantly at the moment in the world, it doesn't represent the artistic and creative side of things. Moving on to what you were asking me about, I'm just explaining this because I think that's where the base of fashion is formed, right? But in terms of the business world in general, we've somehow along the way over the years have lost where our values stand. So somehow money, position, ability to purchase things have become a value set that is okay to go by. So companies are okay to say that the only number they look at is their profit number or their sales number. It's okay to say every year, I want to grow, I want to expand by 20%, I want to become this, I want to become that, without actual, without stopping and thinking about people and planet.
Yes.
And so we've lost our humanity, we've lost our human centricity, and we innovate and we create without purposefulness and without mindfulness. And this is where I think we need to stop right now, and we need to rethink our values. Why do we do things? Why do we work? Why do we exist? What are we here for? I'm sorry if I'm being very I guess, theoretical and Buddhisty, but I'm not. This is not a Buddhisty person. This is a person who's thinking, there must be more to life than stuff and positions and money.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, I'm going to build on that in a moment, but I do notice that we've got a question from Sharon Greenway here. So please, if you do have any questions, pop them in the chat and we'll see if we can answer them. Although she has preceded her question with, she's not sure if this is the correct forum, but we will ask the question anyway. As an Australian floral fabric photographer designer based in Bendigo, how do I get your attention? And she's put her website there, so that's one good way to get your attention.
Yeah, well, it got my attention straight away, and I thought, oh, I'm going to touch base with you after this, Sharon, and say, what is it that you actually need to do? So, the beauty these days, and this to respond to Sharon's question, is you can be small or you can be massive chain, but you've still got a social media feed, and you've got a Facebook feed and an Instagram feed. And I've noticed a lot of people I know in the local industry here in Victoria, what they've done is become quite active in social media during this lockdown. And I know the big groups pay to get Google out front in Google ads or Facebook and things like that. But if you've got something that's really beautiful and powerful, you've got the same resources as everybody else, and you can be an individual solo operator. So there are ways of doing it. And so I would be encouraging you, well, a couple of things, that use the social media. And the second thing is build a community. Because the other fantastic thing that's come out of COVID that I've noticed is the community of fashion has come together. So AFC is a really evident community that is constantly contacting all of its members and putting things out there and checking that people are okay and bringing forums together on how people come together. I belong to a group based out of Melbourne that is just all independent designers and operators, including photographers and stylists, etc. And they've come together during this period and meet really regularly to see hey, what are you doing? Can I learn from that? So that community spirit builds our whole network of design. And it's not about competition, it's actually about collaboration, and that's going to build our industry.
Fantastic. So yes, thank you, Karen. Thank you for that. I wanted to touch on what you were talking about before, Leila, in the last answer that you gave. When at the start of this session, I talked a little bit about the economic value of fashion, worth $2 trillion annually or whatever it is. What I'd like to talk about a little bit now is the social value of fashion, because it's something we've talked a lot about in these sessions, that when it comes to creative industries, there is an economic value, obviously, but it only paints a part of the picture. and there's all these really hard to measure intangible social benefits that we also get that yes, that we get. And I'm wondering from the fashion industry, because you touched on this, Leila, you know, it can be seen sometimes to be quite superficial, I suppose. And what are some of those social benefits that we get?
Absolutely. So again, just going back to the point about creativity, really, one of these, it's such a beautiful, I guess, opportunity or area that people of all levels of creative ability. You know, we all say creativity is about how amazing you are as a pianist, or you know, someone, a painter or an author, but a designer, of course. But so many of us have a creative mind, not necessarily linked to our you know, our abilities in terms of music and art, right? And we have this need to tell people who we are. It's a great way to tell people who you are by the way you dress every day, how you feel, how you connect with people. I think that's a huge opportunity to be creative. It's also an industry that can be wonderful in terms of a rewarding occupation, right? Because you're giving people an opportunity to express themselves creatively and be who they are. The problem is when you start to follow rather than create and lead and be who you are, or your authentic self. That's when the industry doesn't get it right, and that's where it becomes superficial and about what it's not supposed to be, what other people think of you. And I think that's the big divide, right? And you know, one of the things that I now speak about and is a bit shocking to other people is when I say we need to decrease the amount of so I don't want to say shrink the industry, because I think the industry has so much opportunity to grow, but I want to say this drive to always grow bigger and bigger just for the sake of it, just for the sake of the bottom line, is not on. And we need to slow it down. We need to actually say to brands, sell less, but make better margin so you can be happy with the profit that you're giving your shareholders. And I think that's an art. It was something that I worked really hard at in my last role before I became the CEO of the AFC as a GM of a fashion accessories brand in Australia. And it's doable. It can be done, but we just have to really step out of the square of the way we do things and think about things.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and probably a challenge for lots of industries, a challenge to throw down for lots of industries at the moment. I'm interested, you talked there about fashion being a rewarding occupation, which of course I'm sure it is. I'm not in fashion employed in fashion myself, but I can see that it would be. The reason that you piqued my interest there is you also mentioned that you are an accountant by trade, and did you say that you studied in economics? Or
correct. I'm a degree in economics.
Yeah, and Karen, I think you were a gun at economics when you were younger, and you were. I
started out in politics and economics, and then moved to fashion.
And I think I read an article that said you were pushed in that direction because your parents or your school or something didn't see the value in going into the fashion industry.
That's what I was, the term used, and it's a long time ago now, but I still hear the same stories today. Why would you want to do fashion? It doesn't take any brains to do fashion. You could be whoever you like. You could do law. You could go into politics, and you can do, because I was smart in those areas. They could not comprehend that. Why would I want to pursue a creative industry? Well, it didn't take me long after studying politics and economics that actually where I really wanted to be was in fashion. But I did also realise that fashion is not just a creative industry, it's a business industry. And, I referenced before, we all wear clothes. So it's a massive industry. We all buy things that we adorn, that we put on our bodies. So this industry is we can make an impact in this industry in a really positive way. And I'm kind of lucky that I actually did take that road initially, because it's actually taught me a lot over the years. Also, I've had to communicate to people because of the perception that fashion is superficial or frivolous. And, you know, it helps ground me that I know that I've got capacity to work in from a business perspective as well as a creative perspective. And I think having those two things really puts us well ahead of people who are just in the business world, I suppose. But I'd like to make a comment on what you were saying to Leila before. I often talk about us having to have what I call social empathy. And we often hear about personal empathy, a person who's empathetic. They're compassionate, they care about others, they put themselves in other people's shoes. So social empathy is about us looking at that on a lots larger scale and making sure that what we do is responsible. And that's why I use the term responsible innovation as opposed to sustainability. Because when it's about responsible innovation, every decision we make should be responsible. The materials we use, who we get to make it, how much we pay those people to make it, where is it going to go? Have we informed our potential customers of how to keep this and look after it and make sure they don't dispose of it? And have we made absolutely every effort, including how to best make a profit, to Leila's point, and not just go out there and go mass volume and try and churn them out? But have we been responsible socially, economically, environmentally, and everything else along the line?
I'm going to come back to this in a moment, but I noticed that we've got a couple of other questions come through, so I might just have a quick look at those. Tamra Marwood has asked the question. She's wondering how this might link, and this may have relate to something we were talking about earlier, because this came through a moment ago. Wondering how this might link to supply chains in fashion, especially with the Australian agricultural sector. So that would be something that, Leila, I'm sure that AFC talk about and work on regularly.
Absolutely. And so, you know, this is part of the value chain of the fashion industry, starting from primary industry, right? So the agricultural sector, you know, cotton, wool. How do we, one of the things that really baffles me is that I didn't even realize what a big cotton industry we have in Australia. I really didn't. No idea, because you know what, we plant cotton, we harvest cotton, but we don't process cotton, we don't spin cotton here. We send it overseas to be done overseas, then shipped back to us from, you know, being processed in some other country. Same thing with wool. We send everything overseas, and it's manufactured overseas. In fact, our wool is sold way more overseas than it's sold here. Understand, because we have a smaller, I guess, you know, population, but also we really don't highlight it. We don't highlight our own primary industry as much as we could. So yes, absolutely. These are areas that at the moment we are in conversation with the government about. And I go back to government only because, Dave, it is very hard for this industry to say, oh, let's get together and just kind of put all this effort into R&D without some sort of support from the government. You know, we had an offshoring process to reshore, and the word I love is called right shore, which means bringing back industry, but in a considered, meaningful, purposeful way here, not just, you know, doing what we do overseas, trying to compete with, you know, $3 an hour wage, which we'll never, and we don't want to compete with that. Yeah. How do we do it here properly? How do we do it here with innovation and forethought, and using our intellectual property and our, you know, mental creativity, as well as, of course, our artistic creativity?
Yeah.
And I think it probably comes back to what Karen said at the start, also about educating the public as well. Exactly. The whole piece about educating about quality and about what actually goes into a piece of locally made design and locally made fashion. I will at this stage, because you mentioned I'll get I'll just do this shout out, Leila, because you mentioned the wool industry. Just mention that we do have a fantastic Bendigo sheep and wool show every year here, which is fantastic. And also,
I've had the pleasure of being the judge on the fashion show there, and spending a lot of time in Bendigo, and everyone. It's awesome. It's the most fantastic event.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. And we've also got the Bendigo Woolen Mills here, who are I'm going to get it wrong if I try and remember. I saw it on their website. The largest producers of wool for domestic use or something. So they're doing a great job as well. Leila, you wanted to
produce the best wool in Australia, and we produce the most exquisite premium cotton as well in Australia. Our cotton is the whitest cotton in the world. It's got the it's impacted least by pollution, etc. And it's also, in many of our cotton fields, it's sustainable, and they've got systems of recycling the water, and only 95% of the water used is recycled, and the 5% is only because of evaporation. So there's a perception often with cotton that it's sustainably not a great fibre. Well, that's internationally in a lot of other countries where they're mass producing it. But Australia, we're doing it really well, and we should be really proud of our own resources and our own cotton and wool industry here, and getting our designers to use those products.
Leila, you wanted to make a point as well?
You know what, Dave? I completely forgot. So it mustn't have been that
Sorry.
That's some of the support that AFC can provide for people who are, I suppose, starting their own businesses or developing their creative enterprise within the fashion industry, and just perhaps some of the things that you guys can offer. I know that you guys have a mentoring program, for example. Are there other things that AFC do that can assist?
So absolutely. So we've got a program called Curated, AFC Curated, which brings together a cohort of emerging talent that apply for this program. And it involves mentorship, pop-up shops, and workshops, many workshops to help brands, I guess, commercialize their design business, if that makes sense, because that's one of the biggest impediments for most designers. If as you may know, for any industry, there's if you're an architect, for example, you could be an amazing architect, but that doesn't mean you can run a business and manage your accounts and manage people and do all the things surrounding what a business looks like. In the fashion industry, it's a multitude of areas that one has to take care of, from sourcing of raw material all the way to fabrication and pattern making, machinists and manufacturing and sales and marketing and end of life process. What do you do with stock that you're with, and merchandising? So it's a huge area, and we do offer workshops for our members as well, and seminars, and webinars, and so on. We also have, what we did in COVID, we worked on something called AFC Virtual Onward, when the Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week Australia was cancelled, and it really represents an opportunity for Australian designers to sell their resort collection, which is a huge part of our Australian fashion industry. We thought very quickly of teaming up with Ord, which is a B2B platform, virtual platform. And many brands have actually taken this opportunity up to be able to show their collections to buyers locally and globally. So these are a few of the things that project that we work on. But really, looking to the future, I see the role of the AFC is much more a role of advocacy. Again, with government, I'm going to say this over and over again, of really paving the path towards a sustainable, well, sorry to use the word sustainable. I completely understand why you don't like it, Karen, but an industry that can thrive and also really have a legacy and have stewardship in terms of leaving something to the future generations and staying strong, and not being shaken even by things like COVID. I think that if one of the reasons our industry was so badly shaken is because it didn't have very strong foundations from an education, environmental, even diversity perspective, and technology, of course. So lots that we're planning to do with the AFC, and I guess watch that space.
Yeah.
We've put a link to AFC Curated in the comments there. We'll put a link in for LCI Melbourne as well in there, so people can have a look at the activities that you guys are engaged in and the support that you are providing the fashion industry. We've got about 10 minutes left. I've got a couple of other questions, but there's another question there.
Sorry, can I say one thing very quickly?
Yeah, sure.
We also have a sustainability portal and the directory for which was under the original TFIA banner, which is still there, and it actually still gets a lot. It's very antiquated, and we need to update it, but it still gets thousands and thousands of hits, because it has some information about local manufacturing and production facilities in Australia. So all of that you can find under the afc.com website.
Fantastic. Thanks, Leila. I'm going to jump to another question that's come through from Leon Schutz here. Many of these fantastic comments and thought processes seem to be reflected in the business model of outdoor clothing and equipment companies such as Patagonia.
Yeah,
are there opportunities being missed by the fashion industry to consult with industry leaders that might not be solely fashion focused?
Yeah.
It's an interesting question.
Absolutely.
Patagonia is brilliant, but I think that those who want to make change do consult and do engage and do connect. And let's not assume that everyone in fashion is not working effectively in a responsible way. And let's also assume not all outdoor companies are working like Patagonia, but they are an absolutely brilliant example. And I think the industry do hold them up as a shining light, as being one to watch. And how do we learn from them? So I think it was a really good comment that Leon made.
And Leila?
Oh, yeah. Look, I completely agree with Karen. I think we have to look at other industries and how they've, the disruption, I guess, in other industries is way overdue in our industry.
Yes.
Whether it's transport, so many industries are being absolutely disruptive in the way they do things, and we are lagging behind big time. So it's time for us to look, to converse, to collaborate across the board of industries and work together to achieve something like a I would say conscious capitalistic industry that is absolutely committed to being value driven, but also mainly values driven.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a brilliant point.
Fantastic, thank you. And the values driven, I suppose, comes back to a lot of the things that we've already talked about. There's one more comment. This is a comment rather than a question, but I'll just read it out. Community spirit and support in the industry is paramount, and wonderful to hear that this is happening here in Australia. And I think that popped up as you were talking about the support, the group that you have in Melbourne there, Karen.
And also the AFC. So it can happen on a formal level and it can happen on an informal level. But, a few years ago, I headed up Melbourne Fashion Festival, and I did that for 5 years. And in that time, people used to say, what is your most successful, what's the greatest success that you've had with the festival? And I used to say it was about creating community. And I'm old enough to remember the days of Flinders Lane and Surrey Hills in Sydney, when there was a community of fashion where we did produce everything locally. And, you know, you'd go down the local street and in the cafes decisions were made and orders were taken and people knew everything that was going on. And there was a real community. Like my first job was going up and down Flinders Lane with a portfolio, just knocking on doors until someone gave me a job. We can't do that anymore because things are spread. So what we have to do is we have to create our own communities now. We have to make different communities, and they happen through events. They happen through formal groups like the Australian Fashion Council, and they happen also informally where groups of people come together who are like-minded and say, how can we help each other? And the kind of questions are exactly what Leila was just talking about. Where can I get some pleating done? Where can I get something made? Does anyone know where I can get metal zips at the moment? I need some bronze studs to put on some denim. You know, questions like that, which people don't necessarily know because years ago they used to all be in one area. Your peers know the answers to those things, or hopefully if they don't, they might know someone that does. And that's that community spirit that means we all grow together.
Absolutely. And look, it's probably a great place to bring this conversation to a close. We're next week on our studio sessions, we're actually having a discussion about creative co-working spaces and what that means in a time of a global pandemic as well, because community is one of the things that we're all about, and how we go about doing that in a time of a global pandemic when everyone's working from home and there's a lot less opportunity to do that physical kind of connection and networking and community building. How do we do that in a virtual space, which is one of the challenges that we have at the moment, but one that we're trying to meet head on because we see the value in building a community. And one of the things we're trying to do is build a local creative community right here in Bendigo that can support each other. And we've got a range of ways that we're doing that, and some things that we're going to be launching in the next couple of weeks, actually, that hopefully will help with that. Thank you so much to the both of you for your time. It's been a really interesting conversation, really engaging. I've learned heaps. I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to, because I'm a bit of a geek and I love quotes, I'm going to share a couple of others that I came across just because I thought they were fantastic and a good way to kind of wrap it up. And Vivienne Westwood was one of them. And she said lots of things, but she said, fashion is very important. It is life enhancing. And like everything that gives pleasure, it is worth doing well. Yes. And the final one was Bill Cunningham. And he said, fashion is the armor to survive the reality of everyday life. And I thought that was really apt for the times that we're living in right now. Thanks again to both of you. And for everybody else who's tuned in with Facebook, thank you so much. And we hope to see you next time as well.
Great. Brilliant session, Jay. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much. See you, Karen. Speak soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.